Kelin,
Joe Danier.
how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Good. That's the first time you said that in like days.
I know, like you're right. Like that is.
Usually you're like, Ugh. That's good.
You always come on like right on the back end of something shitty happening, and then I try to like put on a face and try to have a conversation. But I will tell you, conversations quite good.
Yeah.
That's my judgment of what we've been able to talk about lately. And I don't know if it's because society's presenting stuff that's low-hanging fruit or we're just damn good. I'm going with the damn good part.
Yeah, I think so. We're just amazing at what we do.
All right. So this is more, I want to talk like two levels, philosophical and also on the micro level too.
Okay.
All right. So in Ohio, we have issue 1 that's going to be on the ballot. One of the only state ballots here or state issues on the ballot. And that is gerrymandering.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I want to look at this in two sort of like frames.
Okay.
So the first frame is when the public hears something like the don't kick puppies laws, right?
Yeah.
You sort of like fill in all the gaps of information and decide that the no kicking puppy law has to be good because it's titled as such.
Mm-hmm.
And as a voter, do you really look through the law to see if the whole thing is just about not kicking puppies?
You're asking me personally?
Personally.
I mean, especially as of lately, yes. I have more lately than ever been saying things like, if something sounds a certain way, if it is so obviously wrong or so obviously a good thing that you're wondering why people are debating it, there must be something else there. There's something deeper that
you are a smart voter. Are you saying, or would you say that the majority of people who vote will look beyond the title of the bill and already determine that kicking puppies is probably a really good bill to have, no matter what's in the legislation?
No, I don't think people look very deeply into things.
So it's super important to have an apathetic, short-sighted voter bloc that will just vote based on the title.
Yeah. Appeal to their emotions, and that's what they're going to go off of.
Okay, so let's talk about the gerrymandering law. So when I say gerrymandering, tell me what you know about it.
Not much, I'll be honest. That is actually one of the things that I have yet to really dive into. The only thing I know is it's something to do with like moving lines of areas to affect voting, supposedly, and like what you consider to be different I don't know, like districts or something, basically, and where those lines lie.
All right. So I am yet undecided which way I'm going to vote on this. And through this discussion, you will be responsible for my inevitable vote. So
no pressure,
a lot of responsibility to ferret out the information on this.
Well, then this is good because you can, me having not looked into it, you can explain it in full.
Somebody's going to get 2 votes. I know that one way or the other, we're going to come to the conclusion whether or not it's a yes on issue 1 or a no on issue 1.
Okay.
And not predetermined. What happens here is going to be...
It is law.
That is law.
That's it. We're deciding it.
Okay. So you're absolutely correct. Gerrymandering is the way that people and parties that are in power get to vote for the district lines, right? So you have a map and you have areas that are represented by people. Right. And within that group are and is stuff. Right. So when you have representative government, you basically are giving someone the power to speak on your behalf. And that person, right, has to represent the majority of what is in a certain area. Okay. So when I hear gerrymandering, okay, it's almost like an insult, right? Gerrymandering is when Republicans get in office, they draw the districts so that gives them a political advantage where there will be more Republican voters in a certain area, right? So when we kind of like sort of go back and find out like what's the purpose of drawing the district lines, that's where like what's the reason? What should our priorities be on drawing a district line? So for instance, if you have state representation and you have an area that is rural, agricultural, right? And so the representative that should be going to state legislature or federal legislature should be taking into account that there are farmers in their area that grow corn, produce crops, do beef, whatever it is that that represents that certain area, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so you draw the district line so it includes as many of the people that that person should represent, even if the lines kind of jog in weird areas, right?
Even if it's sort of like
Exactly. So
not a circle.
someone that understood that we need to have good representation based on those lines looked at the map and didn't take political advantage in the equation, but they took representation into the equation. So, for instance, I'll change it from political to taxes for a minute. Okay, so I live in an area that doesn't make sense on a map. Okay.
Okay.
So if you look at the tax districts for where I live, you see the tax district drawn sort of like as a little L-shaped. And then the L-shaped kind of takes a jog all the way to the left and takes a very appropriate or intentional jog upward to the north. Okay. So when a big development gets built and you have warring areas that wants the taxes from that development, somebody's going to take that area as part of their own.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the incentive of wanting something out of it, which would be the tax base, versus saying you live in city A and I live in city B, and then just draw a hexagon, and then you are in that city. There were other things that entered into the decision-making process of someone fought for a tax base, right? And, sort of like pled their case to a board of some kind, right? And got my area to be part of their tax base for whatever reasons. So when we think about like the corrupted decision-making and what the motivations for the person wanted me included in their tax base, that is also a good analog for what they do in voting districts. Okay.
Yeah.
So far, that's the foundation of how these things are decided. So if you're a Republican and you have majority and your obligation is to draw your voting districts, then let's just say there's a blue area, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a concentration of population in the southeast side of that voting area. If I just jog a little line up into that blue area, I can take some of those voters into my area where I'm still going to win my area, but those voters are not going to be part of mine. What happens to the area that I've taken out of that voting district? They get a little weaker. So I took on a little weakness in my area because I can weather the extra voters,
Mm-hmm.
but that area becomes more of a Republican or Democrat area because of the little jog that I took. So you can see that there would be a voting advantage, and maybe over 5 or 6 redistrictings, I can take more of the voters away and maybe have 2 areas that turn red or 2 areas turn blue, rather than having one really deep red and one really deep blue. And I think that's what most voters, when they see as gerrymandering, they hope that is not what's going into the decision making. Okay. So that's the premise.
Okay.
All right. So issue 1. So what's being, and I love this because I think states are definitely the laboratories to be able to figure this kind of stuff out.
Yeah.
And when somebody throws an idea out there, and do we have to accept as voters as a non-perfect, iteration of something? If it's imperfect, do we have to vote it in just because it needs fixed? Or do we wait until we get an even more perfect version of a law? Which would you do as a voter? Would you say your taxes are too high? Would you take the 1% better now, or say no until it's a 5% better or a 20% better?
I guess it depends on how bad off I am. Like, is it so bad that I need any improvement, or can I wait?
Good question. So this is where a separate state of mind comes into it. So if something is challenged, you ask, who's bringing up the objection? Was this someone who their vote didn't count and they were mad? Or is this outside influence? And who's raising solving the problem, right?
Yeah.
And look at their motivation for whether or not they're coming from. Are they suggesting it to me, hopefully, that I'll dive onto it and say, yeah, I don't like kicking puppies? Or do you wait until a puppy has been kicked and a voter circulated 10,000, signatures in order to get that legislation?
So you're saying basically the difference between the people actually affected by the lines having a problem with it, or an outside party being like, hey, you should have a problem with this.
Exactly. Outside influencers versus somebody noticed something's definitely not right. And the problem is so big, it's time to circulate those signatures and get something on the ballot. So number one, was issue one, was it circulated by internal people who observed a problem or external political motivated people?
So now issue one, I'm guessing then, is stop moving the lines. Is that it? Or
no, it's a fundamental change. It's fundamental. We'll get to that in a minute. But we're just on the who first. So this was primarily done by outside influences. These are people from the outside that have funded the campaign to end gerrymandering in Ohio. So we've established that
people in Ohio, in our area.
Not internal. There wasn't a big mess where everybody, dominated the news cycle about how we need gerrymandering fixed. Not as big a problem internal. It's an outside problem.
And you're sure of that?
100%. I looked at the donations list, the people who are influencing it, the people who brought it to the ballot, and it is not an internal problem. It's an external. So that's number one.
Okay.
So second thing is, hold on. Let me get the second thing. Go ahead.
Is it an internal problem, external problem? Are the people inside actually really affected by it? Or are they just being told you should care about this? Okay,
so the first gateway is that if it's coming from the outside, like we like to manage ourselves inside. Like when we have an internal problem in our household, we like our family to discuss it before our neighbors come and give us criticisms because they might have ulterior motives, right?
Yeah,
we know that we're going to take what's going to benefit us the most.
Mm-hmm.
And those outside people probably will trick us more than they have our best interests at heart. All right. So basically from a strategic standpoint, and this is good in theory, you take 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, and 5 independents, and they redraw the districts. In order to redraw the districts, I believe 9 out of the 15 have to agree that a district has to be drawn. Okay. So the representation, fine. Political. But the problem is this kind of like counters the first thing we talked about. This is not a political problem. This is a representation problem. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We need manufacturing to decide. We need rural to decide. We need urban to decide, right? So if political is the problem, then we don't take partisanship and build it into the equation, right? Mm-hmm. Partisanship is the problem where if you have Republicans and Democrats, what are they going to fight about? Political advantage. They're not going to think about rural, manufacturing, corporate, or whatever. Okay, so that's the first strike it gets with me. Second strike. So first strike was outside influence. Second is that we're staging it so that we're having a political. We're creating a divide between politics where we're evenly spacing out political. But it would mean more to me if on that board there was a representation from agricultural America and corporate America and academic America, and the board was made up of different, who needs to be represented, not political parties that would
do it for the right reasons.
Right. So that's strike 2 with me.
Okay.
All right. And so, but from a strategic standpoint, you have different political parties that will war against it and they'll make concessions and they'll argue about it. And unless there's a bunch of people that say, yay, right, then it doesn't happen. And so makes me feel a little bit better that at least there's built-in fight into the equation.
Yeah.
Right. Now, who puts the people on the board? The answer is judges.
Okay.
Judges then take people, right, who are in that group and they nominate people onto that board of directors. Okay.
Who are going to be the ones making these decisions.
So in a representative republic, what we do is we we vouch for the people who will represent us, right?
Yeah.
So a judge nominating someone, who controls the judge? Who controls then the board? It's not the people. So it's basically kept separate from us. And on its face, it feels like we're being adequately represented because we said Republican, Democrat. One of these is going to be somebody who can represent me. But again, the fallacy is that this is not a political deal. This is a representation deal.
Yeah.
So far, so good.
I think so. Okay.
Okay. So you have judges appointing people on a board that are split between 5 independent, 5 Republican, 5 Democrat. They get to decide whether or not an area needs to be redone. So hypothetical A is they see a lot of problematic places and they have consensus. If there's some stupid things, right, then they all can agree that it's stupid, and you'll get a majority of the people to agree to redraw those districts. But I think the fight is not going to be there, right?
Yeah.
I think the fight's going to come when you have 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats that 5 disagree, 5 agree, and then independents come in there and they get to be the ultimate decider. So the independent nominations are going to be the most valuable on that list, because when you have gridlock on the other 2, they're just basically going to decide who gets to do what.
Yeah.
All right.
Uh-huh.
So far, so good.
Uh-huh.
All right.
I think so.
Now, so objection number 1 is it's outside influence.
Mm-hmm.
Objection number 2, that it's going to be divided on political when we need representative lines. Objection number 3 is it's going to be nominated by people who do not have accountability to people. So if I disagree, so we have a park here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a judge nominated the director of a park in Youngstown. They decided that there were too many deer within the park, and they are going to call some of the deer. They're going to shoot some of the deer, take them out of population. Okay. So if you agree with it, you're like, oh, who cares? But if you disagree with it, what steps can you take to then disagree with the director? And the answer is nothing. They're appointed. You can't vote them out. You can't disagree with them in any terms. You can sue them, but it changes 0 things. They're not held accountable to the population once they're nominated by someone who does not have election control.
Kind of like you got them there to make the decisions on your behalf.
Yes.
Let them do it.
Exactly.
Okay. Whether you like it or not.
So that's strike 4 for me, is that if they start making really poor decisions and the math didn't work out how we assumed, we don't have recourse into just getting rid of them and dissolving that. Once it's a law, we are beholden to whoever unnamed judge equal to nominate into that board. So that's strike 4 with me.
Okay.
Does it feel like we're coming to a conclusion here?
My brain, I'm trying to slow my brain down. That's trying to figure out where you're going and where this is going to get to it. And I'm like, stop, just pay attention.
Well, I'm telling you that all of this is an open conversation. I haven't decided. I literally came into it with what I know. And I haven't, I like the fact that I like the fact that we're going to change something that I disagree with. I don't think the lines are drawn appropriately, and I think they need to be hatched better. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't agree with the method that we trialed this out on its first iteration. I think there's the first time they put this on the ballot, there were 12, right? And it failed. And then this time they put it on the ballot, there are 15. Right. And I'm hoping and assuming that it's going to fail, but I think this is going to pass.
12
ultimately.
and 15
people on that board.
Okay.
4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, 4 independents, and they upped it by 1 and they recirculated it back on the ballot. And I think people hate gerrymandering enough, and I don't think there was a whole lot of people against it. So usually when there's a bunch of money from those outside influences that are for it, you name it the gerrymandering deal, and you haven't heard many people, sort of like talk against it or share details about it.
Mm-hmm.
So as the voters, like, I think if we vote against it, we'll be the minority, right?
Well, and that's my big question is when you talk about voting yes or voting no, how is it worded? What is yes? What is no? What is like, don't do it, whatever?
Yes means that we establish the board that redraws districts in Ohio. no means that we don't. We stick to legislative controls where if the Republicans are in power, they decide on redistricting.
Okay, so it's not on whether or not it should ever be redrawn. It's who gets to decide
Exactly.
how we're going to
Yeah.
redraw it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Elected representatives redraw them now.
Okay.
And it's guided by whoever's in power gets the most say in redistricting, versus legislatively, we don't now have legislators decide. We have a board that decides. And if you can formulate a way to have an objective way of defining those, like I set out, if you're really drawing districts around the representation factor rather than the political factor, I could get on board with that. And I would probably vote for it if it meant doing it in that direction. The problems are that I don't know that if those people who I don't know, who I didn't vote for, are not going to do that, if they're going to take a partisan slant, then I have no means for stopping it and getting rid of it. Once I vote for it, it's on them, and I really hope I made a good decision.
So currently, the people who are deciding this are appointed that power by judges.
Correct.
Those judges we have voted on, right?
The judges have been voted on by us as judges. Yes.
So we voted to get a judge in that we hope makes a good decision on choosing people who will make the decision on
redistricting.
Okay. And so we're going to vote to either allow that to keep happening or bypass the judges and we vote on who's going to decide.
Well, as of right now, it's legislators in the Ohio Congress. So they decide redistricting. This is taking the power away from elected officials that in a group have to decide versus having the established panel that the judges appoint decide. So do you want, 100 legislators in the Ohio Statehouse to decide, or do you want 15 people that a judge chooses to redistrict?
My first gut reaction is it seems like it's easier to get things done or decided or affected when it's not so many cooks in the kitchen, to have that smaller group. Like you said, who is actually doing it for the right reasons and not just for political gain.
But also with a smaller group, it's easier to corrupt a smaller group than it is a larger group.
Yeah.
So you give up you make it more immediate and quicker to action, but you also make it more likely that you can compromise the effect. Because I can get to 15 people once I know who they are and they're drawing district lines. I can have some conversations and I can make some manipulations and I can have districts gone. What's the balance that stops those 15 people from being corrupted to do just the bidding of what would take 100 people in the Statehouse?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, I like the title. Yes, we need to do something about gerrymandering to make it apolitical and make it more representative. I don't think this is the version of it yet. I think they need to hash this out. I don't want it to come from outside influence. I want to say F those people from out of the state that don't give two shits about us at all.
Yeah.
And I want the people who have a stake in the state to come up with the terms and parameters of what happens here. So,
that to me makes the most sense.
Yes.
Why on earth would we listen to anyone from outside the state? That's clearly someone doing it for political gain.
For sure. But how easy would it be that if you feel like you and I will feel the gerrymandering is still a problem? Okay. How hard would it be to go find people who are disaffected by gerrymandering and get the input of what we should really feel? Right. So if like, for instance, if I lived in California and I was a Republican voter, I almost feel like every time I would vote Republican, it would be absolutely for naught. There's no representation for conservatives because of how the entire state votes. So there's got to be that same feel in the state of Ohio where I'm a farmer who does dairy and my representative really cares about corporate corporate taxes or whatever. And I'm thinking, I got my cows here. Like, who's going to bat for me and saying, agriculture subsidies or laws governing, the production of milk or beef or whatever I'm producing. There's a disaffected person somewhere in there, and I want to see that person raising the concern and bringing it to ballot rather than somebody on the outside.
Yeah. Do you in any way see any benefit as far as an outsider making decisions because they are removed from it? Like maybe they could be somewhat more objective or,
Well, and
make it without.
if the media wasn't total dog shit, that'd be my first question. Like, oh, XYZ company, you're on board here. Like you really want this thing to happen. Why? What's your motivation? Right?
Yeah.
And if they use the language of like, that's is manipulative and wants you to buy into their overall patriotism for how much they like Ohio, then it's bullshit. If they're like, well, no, we do business in Ohio and we're affected by XYZ and this person is disenfranchised because they don't have proper representation, I'll be like, that's adequate. That satisfies it. But if it's like, because this is the way I really see it. I think the state of Ohio turned really red, and there are blocks of red votes that Democrats have a disadvantage in the state of Ohio. And I think the people who play the political games on the blue side of things want to come in and shift things up so that blue gets better voting results in elections. Prove me wrong, but anybody who's supporting it, if you don't get a feel where that's really their end, like all those people get discounted as soon as that end is known.
Yeah.
If they really have an objection or they really have support in a way that makes sense, then I'll listen to those ones. But I think it's more, across the board. Here's the thing. The pendulum is, especially in our types of government, that, the person that's out of power will try really hard to get in power. And 99% of everything we see is the strategy to be able to get in power. It's not really for the state of Ohio, and they don't care about the farmers. And really, if we pass or fail, they don't really care.
Yeah.
They have one objective, and that's to get an advantage in some kind of election.
Yeah. And it's so sad too, because that was my thought also, is I wish I could believe that certain people will sort of get in a position of power and do things for the right reasons and to be helpful. But really, it's like you're almost just looking as to how can we protect things from bad people? Like,
that is what our founders thought.
Yeah.
Because anything becomes corrupt, right?
Yeah.
So using it in real terms, let's just say I set up a stand outside here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my stand was, if you need $1, I'll give you $1. So I make a little sign that says, hey, if you need $1, here's $1. And so the first people that come by that don't know I even exist are like, dude, this is like serendipitous. I needed $1 today, and here you are, and here's your $1. So, but as time goes on, right?
Yeah.
And people are like, hey guys, I hear there's $1 guy, right? And the next generation of people weren't separated just by happenstance. They keyed in on you, and they're like, hey, I'm going to bring my whole family, and the whole family is going to get $1 from me. And by the time you get to the end of it, maybe the first 10% were legitimate, where you help somebody out. In the end, you're like, I'm getting worked over, and everybody and their mother needs $1 that day. How did that happen? So that corruption happens because if I set up and say, I'm doing the give the dollar thing, and I make it only last one day, and then I'm doing something completely different, I've used the system of assured corruption, right? And I broke it down. So if I don't sunset it, by the time you get too far in that horizon, most of it's corruption. Only a small percentage of it gets to the person who needed $1 that day.
Yeah, that's so sad too. Because I used to be that kind of person, when it came to voting or looking at things, I always used to be like, well, I want to help people in need, even if it helps people abusing it. They're abusing it, and that sucks. But if the person who really is in need gets the help, I'm willing to overlook that. And then the more you look into things, you're like, oh, the majority are just abusing.
Yeah, human nature. And that's why if you make things difficult, where you spread the responsibility, and our founder said, you spread it responsibility and make it super hard and make the fight be 90% and only 10% of the stuff gets done. It feels inefficient, but that's what's required, right? In order to skew a vote, if you have to stack 1,000 ballot boxes rather than one ballot box. That's hard, and not many people are going to make the effort to cheat bad enough. You've made it hard, so difficult, right? That it's not your best option. Then people pick a different option.
Yeah. I was really hoping I would have a solid answer from our discussion, and I don't. I see why it's a difficult decision.
Yeah, because you want it on the kicking puppies law, you want the title to say, I don't like kicking puppies. I'm going to vote for the non-kicking puppies. Easy peasy.
Yeah.
Right. But when you're like, hey, here's the pros and here's the cons, then you might not necessarily be for kicking puppies, but you're like, maybe this is the best option to stop us from kicking puppies. There's got to be better something. So I'm going to vote this one down. And then your detractors are going to be like, well, Kelin, she likes kicking puppies.
You like
then.
kicking puppies.
Totally like kicking puppies.
And it's like, no, I just think this will save them.
Yes, in the long term, we need a better option. So if I vote against the gerrymandering, it does not mean that I am for gerrymandering. This is a good start, but let's do better and let's pick up better options and invent a little bit more. And I don't have the answer, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know that a 20-person panel is better than a 15-person panel. And I don't know if maybe the legislature is better at situating this, right? It's going to take somebody who's objective, like you said, that is smart enough to know really what's happening. And then it has to take a people of people who have been affected by it to have the most say in it, not the people who benefit most from, either it stagnating and staying the way it is or changing, but the people who actually are surviving the problems that it's creating. And then their insights are going to be way more valuable than a politician that just wants the votes.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Unfortunately, so much of this is getting people that will listen to other people and take into account other things that may not just be beneficial to them. That's going to be damn near impossible to find.
That is the current state of politics. Our 90% number of the manipulators that aren't really smart enough to be even in it and they're just looking to see where their advantage lies, those are not the people that you want part of the conversation, because all they're going to do is scheme themselves into an advantage.
And I feel like even other issues other than the gerrymandering, we're seeing kind of the same thing, like you said, where it's not that I'm pro kicking puppies, but I think there's a better way to handle it. I mean, you could look at that with abortion. You could look at that with the presidential
100%.
election. It's like,
they all become that. There's
yeah.
It's not just a coincidence that all of these things end in an impasse. That is, most of human nature ends in that impasse.
Yeah.
Because how can you represent 300 million people and all varying degrees of, opinion and principle and, the standard of their lives and how they feel? You can't adequately represent them. So what do you hope to do? Okay. So if you've got two people that are against one another, you got the people who think corn should be eaten in the grocery store, and you got the people who think corn should be eaten by cows, right? They're both freaking right. So you can't give one the ultimate advantage. You can't pick a favorite when both of them have a really good opinion about where corn is best used for.
Yeah.
You got to give them both the concessions and both their time to see if theirs is better or not.
Yeah.
It's not black and white. That's the biggest part, is that it's not a villain and hero type of thing. People who support gerrymandering and support not gerrymandering, neither is right. It's a hybrid of those voices.
It's a tough decision. I don't know.
But we laid out the principles, right? The principles of your neighbor and outside influences having a voice, F them, right? That's the principle. Internal house, let's figure it out with the people who are actually affected.
Mm-hmm.
The people, especially in government, that we're allowed to vote something into law and make a mistake. So if you want to say, let's try this panel for 6 months, right? And if it doesn't work out, the voters could every 6 months have to vote that they're doing a really good job. There would be a good addition, because if you get some jackholes in there that do get corrupt, you're 6 months away from disbanding it and going back to what the legislature would do.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, if we are voting in representatives, basically, you've always heard, government's supposed to be like by the people, for the people. We are hiring these representatives. And if they do a shitty job, we should be able to fire them
100%.
and find a replacement.
Right. So okay, so that's my stipulation. They add the verbiage in there that 6 months, this thing expires and have to be voted for again.
Mhm.
I'm voting for the gerrymander because I want to give them a chance to see it. If I'm stuck with it forever, then there's no way I vote for it.
Yeah. So what's it worded now? Stuck forever?
Stuck forever. It's part of law and it would have to be overturned. And it was hard enough to get it on there. You think what it's going to be to get it off of there.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think I've decided, and I think I'll decide and I'll vote for you too. So when I fill out, just hand me your ballot.
Go ahead and
I'll
just
fill in that circle.
I'm gonna be like, I don't know.
You're gonna vote. You're gonna vote no for it, and you're gonna write at the bottom that said, "Put a sunset in 6 months," and you have my vote. And that way, you don't love kicking puppies, but there's a stipulation that would make it palatable for you to vote yes.
Could we do this with other issues too?
I so wish we would sunset freaking everything.
That would be great. If it was just like, here's what we're going to do for 90 days, for 6 months, for whatever. This representative, this policy has this much time to show that this could be a good thing. Or we retool.
90 days, you reevaluate. And a sunset basically means it automatically disappears, right? So in order to not make it disappear, you have to represent.
So you have to vote again either way.
You have to vote again. So it automatically goes away. That's the most important part. So if we make a bad choice, it automatically goes away. So let's just say we don't have to fight to get it to go away. It automatically goes away. So if the public's like, oh, that was freaking awesome, they will go to the polls and extend that
Keep doing it
forever. Right?
Will it then feel like we're just constantly voting on something?
Yes, that's what every year we are voting for things that are good and letting bad things automatically go away.
Listen, as long as I don't have to have constant political commercials and campaigning.
You wouldn't have to, because the effects of it would be almost everything, right? Because then they wouldn't have enough resources or time to tell you everything to vote. If the ones that are super important that are bad, they're going to get lots of money and say, make this thing go away. Don't vote for this thing. Let's just take anything. Let's take any idea that came out. Okay, let's just say giving money to Ukraine, right? We vote for it. It automatically sunsets, and then it comes up for another vote, right? It has to be super popular in its second iteration in order for everybody to say, yeah, that was a good idea the first time around. Let's do that one again. If it's incredibly unpopular and it was a terrible decision, that all you have to do is do nothing. You shut up about it. You have to do anything. And oh, the Ukraine thing, where'd it go? It went away because it was set to go away.
Because then you're going to have those people, though, that are like, well, that's not enough time. We need more time to see. We don't know if it's really going well or not.
So that, again, that is incumbent on the person that's presenting the idea to make it work well and do it quickly, instead of the federal government, the state governments, or the people paying for these projects. In your personal life, right? How long would you give a vendor to come through on a benchmark to let you measure whether or not something was happening? You build a house, right?
Yeah.
If they dug a hole and they didn't do much, right? Cool. You're fired, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have my foundation built by this date, you get no money. It gives an incentive to get something done well and fast.
Yeah.
Right?
Or if it's I'm having an issue with a broken whatever, and if I got to keep calling and keep waiting, or you come out to fix it and it's still not working and I got to wait for you to come out again, I'm going to someone else.
Absolutely. And giving the consumer the option to break up regularly. All right. So if we're in a relationship, you're my wife, Kelin. Okay.
All right.
Every year, we're on December 31st, we're going to break up. Okay.
Oh, that's sad.
All right. We're done.
Okay.
We cut bait. Now, if there are enough reasons to stay broken up, then we stay broken up. If there are enough reasons to say, hey, I really miss you and I want to redo the relationship and I want to redate you and make the commitment to you again. Right.
Yeah.
But at least it sets in stone that am I in December? If I really want you still around, right, I'm going to then, start to court you again.
What if we disagree on this?
What? The breakup
What if,
thing?
yeah, what if I was like, I thought it was really good and we were happy, and you're like, no, not really.
Well, that's the thing. Like, you get a chance to break up, and it gives you incentive to make the relationship better at the end of the year and re-court
Yeah.
you to see if I still
Oh,
like
I
you.
could be like, oh, it's November. I better start really putting in some effort into this.
Otherwise, if you didn't have an incentive to re-court you and, reconvince you that I'm a really good spouse, right?
Yeah.
What incentive would I have? Or I just let things trail off into nothingness.
So put an expiration date on marriage licenses.
Marriage licenses, absolutely.
And you have to go down to the courthouse and renew it.
It's
Like a driver's license.
Honestly, if it was awesome, you would do it again, right?
Yeah.
If it's not awesome, then you're going to just let it expire and part your ways.
Driver's licenses, we do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely good philosophy in breaking up from a government standpoint, so that if there's a piece of legislation that ever goes beyond one term or 1 year, then it's bad legislation. They're trying to hook you in and make it hard for you to divorce.
Yeah, they're going to use the excuse, well, it takes time to do something.
Bullshit. Make it happen.
Yeah.
Make it happen fast.
Really, they're like, we just want power longer. And
yeah, if I can keep you waiting, then I can justify my existence longer. But that's the kind of be strict the other way around, where make the servants of us not make excuses, make them show us results.
Yeah, I really think we have gotten so far past the idea that they are to serve us. They are working for us. And it is very much like people get in government, they get in a position of power, and now they're over everyone else. And all we're doing is fighting each other to try to control that. When it's like, wait a minute.
They got a really cool thing. They never have to prove themselves. They get a really good paycheck. They don't work all that hard. They make excuses and blame somebody else all the time. They're the world's worst employee.
And once you get to a certain level, there is no expiration date on it.
It's a forever thing.
Yeah.
Oh, incompetent? There you go. Keep going.
Senile? Well,
why don't we give you more stuff to do?
Yeah. What is wrong with us?
So, and that kind of brings me to the point of, like, when gerrymandering comes up, right? And it becomes like the hot button issue. Mm-hmm. Why did we start there? Like, of all of the problems, right?
Yeah.
That we think needs changed and put all of our money and energy into it. Why that one? Like, why not start with one, government waste and expense and cushy jobs in government and way more employees than you have work to do? Like, why isn't the target ever on the people that are causing the problem?
Yeah. See, I always thought, and I could be way wrong. I don't know how often we look at gerrymandering or anything, but my view went to almost like, is this because it is a presidential election year and they want certain guidelines around certain voters to put certain people in local government, to put certain people in the states, to get them to vote for federal, and it's all just tearing up to the end game of the presidential election and how they can win based off of who's going to vote down here. You know what I mean?
If you looked at a politician's mission statement, their number one rule is getting elected. Okay. And so everything they do serves getting elected. If they have to cheat, steal, strategize, manipulate, it serves the number one thing on their mission. If they have to deal with the public and give them stuff and, like, answer to and do debates, that's stuff they have to do. They would never choose to do. Their number one goal is to get elected.
I did see, and I think it's probably changed. It may not have changed. I'm not sure. But when the political signs started going up in people's yards and there was the switch from Biden to Harris, you keep seeing everybody's like slogan, make America great again, country before politics, or whatever the heck that was, and all this other stuff. And one slogan was, let's win this. And I just went, oh, like, way to be obvious. It wasn't anything about country or making something better or for the people or whatever. It was, let's win this. And I was like, I don't like that. Did you see that? You know who I'm talking about? Yeah. I don't know if they have changed that, but I was just like, wow, way to make it obvious that you just want your people in power.
First priority right there.
I don't know who thought that was a good idea to make that your campaign slogan, but I don't think it was. But that's the
So
truth.
if you give, let's just say you were the consultant then for issue 1. Let's just say it fails. We're going to take another crack at it. We know that we want to fix something or do something about it. So there aren't disenfranchised people from lack of representation. You consult them and say, in order to pass our 4 steps where you failed last time, what would you tell them to do different to put it on the ballot next time?
In order to pass, like, specifically, you might have to start me off with what you mean by this.
Okay, so the first one was outside influence. Like, we don't like the fact that other people are coming in and causing issues and problems that don't even affect them whatsoever.
Yeah.
Right. So the first suggestion we would make, let's have it be originated from the people who are affected by it.
So
the
you
farmer,
have to be
the corporate.
What's what I'm looking for? A resident.
Yeah. The objection has to come from inside the state, not outside the state. So that would be number 1.
Yeah.
Number 2, that if it, we're willing to let you experiment and have an idea for something. We know there's a potential it might work and it might not work. So let's put an expiration date on it so that if it's the latter of the 2, or if it doesn't work, it goes away.
Yeah.
Let's assume that we get a good judge who understands what we're trying to accomplish, and they appoint people that are truly uncorrupted and really want to do this well. But the pressure then of what if we don't, how do we get rid of those people? So then you figure out a way that if they're not getting anything done and they don't understand the assignment, that there's a way to get rid of them. So that's 3.
Yeah.
What was the 4th objection?
Was it talking about people that do it for the right reasons, getting rid of them? God, we have bad memory.
I know there was 4.
Outside influence, corrupt people, timeline, and
well, I'll just make one up because it
Yeah.
might be the representation from the different areas that are being affected by it. So agriculture, corporate, urban, whatever.
maybe like enough in each. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So
Okay.
instead of it being politicians, it's the people that represent. So the board makeup is of the people that are being represented rather than politics, which politics
Yeah.
should not be in this.
Yes. So you're talking about make up the board rather than like an elected official, an actual resident.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. The board is made up by someone, the dairy farmer,
An average Joe,
CEO,
not a politician.
0 politicians. The board is
Ooh.
made up by the people who are affected by the representation, and you have a segment, a slice of every one of those segments. And here's the nicest part. If you really want to be apolitical, if you can demand the state of Ohio hide your political affiliation during the election, so when you get your ballot, it says a name, right?
Yeah.
You don't know if they're Democrat, you don't know if they're Republican. So if you're doing like straight Democrat, you wouldn't be able to tell who's who. So the stuff you would vote on are the people that you knew and you were connected with the information. I don't think there should be any partisanship
Yeah.
on a ballot. So when you vote for a judge, right? Judges are supposed to be apolitical. But if you drive around and see, you can tell what persuasion the judge is when they're supposed to be apolitical.
Oh yeah. I thought it was even written. I always feel like I've seen Republican judge candidate, Democrat judge candidate.
It's supposed to be apolitical. When it comes to judges, they're not making political decisions. They're making judicial decisions.
We are so corrupt.
I'm telling you.
But that
again, the common denominator, if it is political, it will become corrupted.
Yeah.
So you have to give the advantage to the people and the disadvantage to the politics. And you're making it easier for the politics by telling, I would much rather saying voting for Tom Smith, dairy farmer, than Tom Smith, Democrat.
Yeah.
Right? Wouldn't that be better, knowing what segment of life the person comes from and voting for the person who's most like you? So get politics completely out of it. I know that with primaries and all of that, I think that breaks our system anyway. So having, wrecking that is not.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of people that say, oh, I'm just going to go on a ballot and just vote all Democrat or all Republican or whatever. It's like, well, what if you now could that put us sort of in gridlock with certain things if people
can't figure out who their persuasion is?
Yeah.
Fuck yeah, it could.
I mean,
I'm hopeful for that.
If we are all like, screw parties, screw affiliates, let's just vote for the right thing to do or the right person for the job. And then we have a mixture of both.
Well, think about it. Like the apathy is that if we're talking about this with you and I, and we're completely, cutting it up. How many, let's just say nobody heard this conversation and they just went to the ballot box and they voted for it, right? Without having, how many on autopilot voters there are that need to know which one's the Democrat in order to fill out their little bubble, right? We break that. Now you get less participation because people don't know what to do, so they do nothing. And then we'll see how much intelligence is in there versus how many autopilot voters were there. Because the politicians like the autopilot voters. They depend on the fact that you had an R there, so I filled it in, right?
Yeah.
You take that away, you don't get your autopilot voters anymore. I would rather people who don't know what they're doing not vote.
Yeah.
And only the people who went in there intentionally knowing how they're going to vote and voted that way.
Oh, I typically, if I don't know anything about an issue,
skip it.
I don't. I'd be like, I don't know what that, like the gerrymandering. I mean, up until today, I thought it was about, do we want to just stop moving the lines? Like, I don't know.
And they are counting on that by naming it Kick the Puppy, right?
Yeah.
That's really what it is.
Yeah. Cause I swear I kept hearing all these things like, vote no gerrymandering, or we don't like gerrymandering. And I'm like, well, that's not even the issue then that we're voting on.
But again, you got autopilot voters that all they need is the key word, and then they'll vote for the key word, and they'll never look into one paragraph, one line of what the law or rule means.
Yeah. And don't they sort of even at the federal level do certain things where they'll be like, hey, we want to pass this law because this is so clearly wrong and this needs change. And typically you're like, yeah, 100% it does. But in addition to it, if we do this, I want
we're going to do this,
too.
and this.
That has nothing to do with it.
Almost all. I'm not going to say almost all of the bills that are voted for have attachments in there that have nothing to do with it. So the inflation.
And how is that legal? How is that legal? How is it no more kicking puppies? It's illegal. But if you want to make sure people aren't allowed to kick puppies, you also have to vote that I get a new car every year.
Okay, so let me make fun of politicians because they're freaking corrupt idiots. Okay, So here's the deal. So let's just say I sunset a law, right? Which means that every year you got to vote something that you voted for before. You mean I'm going to have to do some work and I'm going to go in the office and I have to study this, vote on it again? I can't take my 3-month vacation between July and November. If you do that, I'll have real work to do. Everybody else in the United States feels no no of sympathy for you because you got to do hard work. You are an overpaid, slacking moron that does more about the the politics side rather than being an intelligent human being. So yes, if you broke every bill down so that one vote equals one bill, no attachments, no sidelines or side items, whatever, then yeah, you'd have a lot more work to do. And none of us give two shits about you having to work harder.
Yeah.
You're overpaid already.
Because your position is not meant to be, I'm going to be powerful and make a lot of money. It's, I'm a servant. It's supposed to be a servant.
Yeah.
Position.
Work harder, douchebags. That's what I got to say to them. So yes, it would be harder if they had to vote on every bill and they couldn't slam a bunch of things together. Just go look at the Inflation Reduction Act. Or if you want to get your head soaked with frustration, then it's like, oh, inflation reduction. Do you want to reduce inflation? I want to reduce inflation, so let's vote for this thing. And I want you to go line by line and try to figure out how that relates to in reducing inflation. There's 700 and some items to reduce inflation.
Gosh.
And I bet you none of them reduce inflation, right?
Yeah.
None of them actually reduced inflation, but yet we had something that was called Inflation Reduction Act.
Why would we not vote for that?
You're an idiot. You like inflation? How dare you?
Why would you not vote to stop inflation?
But this is the idiocy that when you actually talk about it with reasonable people, you think how absurd it is that we live in a country that is ruled by that class that does this kind of manipulation, and everybody will go to bat for them. And you know what they'll do to us? Excoriate us for how dare we?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So you might know about this then. So in my attempt to educate myself on issues and people leading up to this election, I keep hearing the same argument about um, the border and people coming across the border. And you keep hearing Kamala Harris say things like, we initially had this bill drawn up that would have affected border safety. It would have been a good idea. Everybody was for it. It would have done everything everybody wants it to do, yada, yada, yada. But the Republicans, mainly Trump, called his people and said, don't vote for that, kill it right now, so that he could get political leverage with that during the election season. And then I keep hearing that. I keep hearing that side of it is, oh, he could have helped this issue, but he chose not to, just to make himself look better down the road. One time I heard somebody push back and say, well, yeah, that was called the Something Citizens Act or something. And the reason it didn't work is, and then that person got interrupted, and now I still don't know. Was that the case? Was there a bill that would have solved all the problems and somebody squashed it out of sheer greed and personal gain? Or was it something that was like, oh yeah, it looked all hunky-dory except for this, which is why we squashed it? I don't know.
It depends on how you look at it. If you look, okay, so we'll change the subject so that you kind of get the same analogy.
Okay.
All right, so let's just say you were running gas prices and you were making terrible decisions, and gas prices got up to like $4 because of everything that you did to make $4. And you're like, oh, I got an election coming up in 6 months. So I'm going to do is I'm going to create a bill that gets gas prices down to $2, and so I can get elected. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't really solve the problem. What it does is it manipulates the gas prices back to 2. So I don't look quite as bad. And then your opponent looks through it and says, well, that does lower the gas prices to $2. So technically it solves the problem. You're down at $2, but the way you got there wasn't authentic. Right. You don't have $2 in your pocket. So I'm going to write a bill, not that makes it so you have an opportunity to make $2. I give you $2 to technically it's satisfied that yes, you have $2 in your pocket, but how'd you get it? Oh, I gave it to you. Not authentic.
Not helpful.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, they knew coming up to election that immigration was going to be a terrible thing for them. So ramming through something that will take the components that would benefit them, but not structurally solve the problem. So they get all upside, which is they get to claim XYZ happen without fixing it from a actual level. And so if you're on this side, you're like, hey, look, they killed my bill for immigration. And then on the other side, you're like, well, that helps them, right? Doesn't really solve the problem. But now the energy is taken out of immigration so that when I truly want to solve the problem, there's no energy left in it, so that's a dead deal now. So which do you pick? Both are terrible. Doesn't get solved permanently. It was just a quick fix to get you elected versus, I got to kill solving the problems 3 months ahead of time so I can solve the problem permanently and going forward. Which one do you pick? They're both terrible. And they both, as politicians, destroyed something and removed the public support for it because they made it a political issue. Politics kills good ideas. Politics kills good motivations.
Yeah. It's a shame.
It is. It's a shit show. And I hate politics and I love politics at the same time. I liked going through politics and trying to understand it. And it's such a manipulative, sophisticated game. I almost don't want to pay attention to politics because it breaks your brain.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels like, especially right now, people almost discuss politics like they would sports and 100%. Teams.
You're absolutely
right. And then you talk about like how they're going to win and what their strategy is and what team are you on. And then you went, oh shit, this is our lives.
Yeah. Because remember, it's the same thing. A politician's job is to win. A sports team job is to win.
Yeah.
What happens underneath it, how you get to that end?
Yep. And if you got to play dirty, well, okay.
You get away with it.
Are you making someone money?
So do you think the Cleveland Browns, right, have a better chance of playing dirty and getting away with it, or the federal government playing dirty and getting away with it? Which has better advantage in getting away with it?
Oh, I think the federal government
100%.
get away with it.
100%. Why?
Because they control everything.
They control it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The Cleveland Browns don't control the rules. The referees control the rules.
Yeah.
In the federal government, the government controls the rules that apply to the government. So let's just say the teams control the rules on the football field, right? What do you think they would do? They would make the rules that most benefit the team that's on the field.
Yeah.
So if your kicker's really good and everything's bad, let's make rules that give advantage to the kicker and disadvantage to everybody else on the field. If you're got a great wide receiver, a terrible kicker, then wide receivers get the advantage and kickers get all the disadvantage. That's the way government works in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And all they do is shift the rules depending on who can make them.
Did we ever, or are we ever gonna look at the issue of term limits and vote on that for certain things?
At what age did you first hear term limits as something we should be pursuing?
I don't know. I feel like I've heard that for years.
As a kid, I heard all about term limits.
Yeah. Why is that not a thing?
Because the people who would vote for term limits are the people that would have the term limits applied to them.
And they don't want that.
Well, have they ever voted themselves a pay reduction? It's the same reason why they would vote term limits. It means that they would lose their job. They're voting to lose their job. The number one goal of a politician is to get elected, and you want them to vote for something that makes it so they can no longer be elected.
Yeah, it's almost like to vote for term limits, you have to have that idea that the actual people are voting and your individual
if individuals could sign a form that we vote for term limits against them without them having to sign legislation, cool. We live in a representative republic, so we don't have those controls. The people who would we be doing that to are responsible for being so noble and saying, we should have term limits and pay reductions. We did not do a good job today.
You know what? The government's in danger of shutting down. We'll shut our own salaries down and we won't get paid. Nope. We're going to not pay everyone else, but we'll get it.
Yeah, the school district has a cash crunch. You ever notice what they do? What's the first thing that gets axed?
Busing.
Busing.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because it's going to be the biggest annoyance for the parents, and they're going to immediately force the schools to spend the money to get busing back. They don't pick reducing internal expenses or vacation or pensions or whatever, because that wouldn't get people pissed off and say whatever. They pick the thing that will make the public put the most pressure to end this thing because it is going to annoy the parents.
Busing.
They know it.
And then they threaten like pay to play sports or something. And,
which would annoy.
Yep, they're gonna be like, oh no, we need our Friday night football. We are not cutting that. Let's get some money to this.
You see the strategy? When it comes to getting their way, they will squish you if they have to get their way. They won't take it on themselves and them say, okay, $1 paychecks until we get our shit together. Never in a million years. They're like, oh, we're gonna cut military out of the equation. They're not going to get their paychecks. Why'd they pick that one? When the money runs out, why is it military paychecks are the first one to feel the effects of that?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I remember one year my husband was deployed and he was overseas and they're talking about, we're getting emails and letters from his bosses and everything like, hey, be careful, like watch the spending because that you may miss a paycheck or something. And I wanted to call up my husband up and be like, why don't you put that gun down? Put it down. Go sit down because don't go get shot at for nothing.
But
That's insane.
They picked the military for the same reason they picked the school buses. Whatever will put pressure on them to vote with taking responsibility away from the elected official who are dipshits that can't get their shit together. They make you and I pay and be annoyed so that we're like, I don't care. You just affected me. Get it done.
Yeah. Yeah. We're so corrupt.
Yeah. But you can skew the rules. Like what would happen if we are like, okay, we don't want we want the public to be insulated for our incompetence, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the first people to pay consequences are us. And that'll give us proper motivation to get something done, right? So how about we lose our perks? If there's any lack of money, we lose our perks first, right?
Yeah.
Then we have pay raises and then our pensions, and we make it real uncomfortable for us. And then if we run out of money that they have to spend on us, where, food services and parties in the evening and transportation services and jets and all that stuff just goes away. And then when we're just as sickly and inconvenienced as possible, then we'll go to the people and annoy them.
Yeah.
I'll take things that will never happen for 1,000, Bob.
So I've asked this question before, but it brings us to ask it again, Joe. When are you starting your campaign?
Never in a million years. When the political system becomes intelligent, where they need engineers that are interested in hearing how to solve problems in a way that's objective and nonpartisan, then I volunteer. Until then,
start a movement.
Start a movement. We will buy a state. We'll buy, like Texas has wanted to secede forever, right? We'll go to Texas, let them secede. Then I will be part of the sanity government that comes from Texas.
You want to live in Texas?
If they have the best chance of seceding from the obligatory, the stupidity of federal government, I'm in. It gives me the best chance of at least having some kind of influence. I just don't want to be a cog in an insanity wheel.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think people that go into politics begin with the right intentions and get corrupted?
I do. There are many local politicians who, when they gave their stump speeches here, I was like, I'm all in. There was a couple Democrats that I absolutely supported and had probably pretty different political views than I did, but they were solid people. And if they went there and represented and were themselves in that government, I was like, I'm all in. And I watched them go into the machine and I find out what you can't be when you're there. So is it you are bringing yourself to government, or is government influencing you and taking your soul to become part of it? And we'll see 100% of them. And I'm talking 5 or more people I watched go there and become absolutely opposite. And when I have discussions, I've been on friendly terms with these people. I ask them, what changed you? What was the real thing? And you know what they said to me?
What?
If you want to get something done, you have to play the game. 100% of them say, if you don't play the game, you just get washed out. The machine is more important than the individual. So my influence is my feelings. I had to play the game if I wanted to be effective. And they got ruined.
Isn't there like a Harvey Dent quote? Either die a hero or live long enough to watch yourself become the enemy.
Yeah. Yep.
Batman. It's a good one.